Welcome, everyone. I see many familiar faces. We're still waiting for everyone to start dropping in here for a few minutes, but really excited and happy to have all of you over here today. Uh, Finnish people would start now sharp, and we have a packed schedule for 45 minutes, but maybe 30 seconds or so for everyone to get settled and like grab a cup of tea or coffee or juice or water and relax for a moment. I see there are still people joining and entering the waiting room right now. Um, yeah, perfect.
Fantastic. It's great to have so many people from all over the world as well today. I
Mm.
understand we've got people from India and Europe and America. So welcome everybody. Just hold on. We'll be starting shortly as soon as everybody's here. Just give it another 20 more seconds, I think.
And if you notice the chat over there, throughout the session, you can send us notes or questions or comments or things you would want to hear more about. So let's make this also very interactive. Beautiful. Now I don't see that many names popping up, so maybe we can get started. Christy, I'll hand it over to you. Christy,
Thanks,
sorry.
Linda. That's great. So good morning, and I should say good afternoon to everybody as well, and welcome to today's exciting webinar. I'm Kirsty Christie, the citizenship lead at Avanade and part of the EU Code Week consortium. So EU Code Week is an EU government investment where charities, companies, civil society are all joining together with the aim to inspire and prepare millions of young people, in particular girls, which is very relevant with Linda, with the digital skills they need to lead, innovate and create for our digital world. And as you know, digital skills are no longer optional. They are the key to driving the future. So today's webinar is actually on the back of our EU Code Week Girls in Digital and our Careers in Digital campaign, which we've just been running concurrently. And who better to lead on the discussion for how educators can build communities in computer science than Linda Liukas. Linda is a TED speaker, an internationally acclaimed author, illustrator, and educator, and she's best known as the creator of the Hello Ruby series, a beautifully illustrated collection of books that teaches young minds about computers and problem solving through storytelling and imagination. Linda's a pioneer, an advocate for making technology playful and accessible, whose work from her base in Helsinki is reshaping how we introduce technology and creativity to children around the world. Today, Linda will be talking to us about how we build communities in computer science. Linda will explore how to build strong, meaningful communities in computer science, especially for young learners and underrepresented voices. You'll leave today with what you can borrow from Linda's experience of building communities and how to create spaces where all students feel like they belong. And whether you're in education, policy, or industry, or even a parent tuning in today, this is a moment to connect and reflect on how we shape the digital future together. Please join me in giving a warm virtual welcome to Linda Liukas. Thank you for coming, Linda.
Amazing. This is the moment when you hope that there would be the Google feature with like lots of hearts and little notes coming, popping up. Perfect. So my name is Linda. I'm a children's book author and illustrator from Helsinki, Finland, but I've been living in Paris for the past few years. And I've been part of this movement to teach young children programming skills for the past 10 years, which in some ways is a very short time, but it's also a decade worth of experiences in building all kinds of communities. And for today's talk, I figured that I would kind of map that journey and build some lessons learned and takeaways that any educator or policymaker or a parent, as we mentioned, can borrow to help bridge the gap between computer science and children even further. And the way this is going to work is I'm going to do a 20-minute introduction. on some of the lessons I've learned, and then we're going to have a discussion with Kirsty afterwards, where all of you are invited to tune in and send your questions, send your remarks, and you can use the chat box over there to type in your remarks. And for those of you watching on YouTube, we'll be also monitoring YouTube for any questions onwards. And then at the end, there is a little announcement, a little competition that we're going to be talking about later on. So stay for that. And this whole webinar is going to be recorded and available later on, so you'll be also able to watch it later. So as mentioned, I'm a children's book author, but my role and job has taken me into many places. Sometimes it means picture books, sometimes it means professional development, and sometimes it's about building physical computers out of cardboards and creating those childhood memories where you learn about computation in an embodied way. My work started with coding, but pretty soon I realized that computer science as a discipline is much bigger. It goes beyond coding alone, and it includes things like algorithms, privacy, and nowadays obviously AI and machine learning. And in some ways, I think we are all trying to figure out the vocabulary and language with which to talk about all of this. And one of my favorite kind of expressions or ideas right now is that we're actually teaching kids about computation. And I know for a lot of you, it's like, but like, didn't we just learn about computational thinking? Didn't we just learn about coding? But what I mean is the idea that computation and computers are so universal in our societies that it really it is worth having a lot of words and a lot of vocabulary to describe them. And it's good that we have these discussions in the 10-year path or even over that many of us have been working in this field. My sort of latest obsession has been around playground making and building. And I noticed a few names in the chat of people who've actually gotten to visit this playground in Helsinki, Finland. It's in Ruoholahti. And the idea was to explore how kids could learn in a public space about computers. So I'll be sharing a few lessons learned on that too. I'm going to have 4 stories from 4 real-world projects I've built around teaching and learning computer science. And they have these 4 alliterated ideas around starting small, scaling with soul, shifting to stories, and showing up in space. And at the end, we're going to do a little wrap-up. So the very first experience I have into building a community in computer science started in roughly in 2009. At the time, I was a business school student. I had 0 experience in programming, or a little bit like in my teenage years, but I didn't consider myself a computer science student in any way. But I was very interested in this world. And Rails Girls was a project born out of that. And some of you might have followed my career from those days already. And I rarely talk about Rails Girls anymore because it's been a decade and I feel like I'm not hands-on or active enough in it. But while I was putting together this presentation, I realized that there are some lessons learned that still hold true today. So Rails Girls was always framed as the first experience in software craftsmanship. And there's lots of ways you can describe something like this. A first experience in writing code, a boot camp, a weekend learning session. But we chose these words very carefully because we realized that no one will become a programmer in just one weekend, but everyone can have a first experience. And first experiences really matter. So we put the effort into creating a space where it felt like the young women joining these sessions were spoken in a way. I was 23 or 24 at the time, so this was my world very much. We had fun posters, we had balloons. It was very sort of whimsical and cool. And it was a chance for a lot of these young women to meet like-minded people for the first time, other women in programming who they might want to become later. And it was also a chance to meet the coaches. So we would always invite local programmers to be hands-on guides during the sessions with the goal that maybe one day they would feel less intimidated in joining actual technical meetups when they had a familiar face like, oh, I recognize you, you're from the Rails Girls meetups. And the first event was done in a very haphazard way. It happened in Helsinki, but then something interesting happened. We put all of the materials online on a website, and we made a nice little video of the event, and the word started to spread. Twitter was back then the number one way programmers communicated to one another, and people really started to sort of talk about this event. And back then there was very few efforts in gender diversity or diversity even like in the broadest sense in computer science or coding. And this was something brand new back then. And I especially remember that tweet on the upper left corner, DHA's David Heinemeier Hansen. He's the founder of Ruby on Rails, the framework we used in our session. And I remember thinking that, oh my gosh, this is like the best day in my life. DHH knows I exist. But then something interesting happened. All of a sudden, we got an email from Singapore, from a local organizer, programmer called Jason Ong, who said that, have you ever considered doing this event in Singapore? And me and Karri, who was my co-founder, we were young, we had zero money, zero budget for anything, but we were also young and we had never been to Singapore. So we decided to organize the event over there. And ever since that time, I think Railscales has been in like almost 500 cities around the world. It's been a decade and it's not as massive as it used to be, but it spread and it found meaningful communities around the world, people who wanted to take the chance and build this event together with us. And there's a few reasons why it spread so quickly. We open sourced all of the guides to organize Railscales events. And I think Code Week and Code Hour and so forth, they all do this beautifully as well. For us, the fact that these guides lived on GitHub, which is a place where programmers know how to work in, was a big thing. It made it easy for programmers to add new guides, update the guides, and keep them going. The coaches were a huge part of the success. They were highlighted in each and every event. We usually did like a little thank you dinner for them after the event. And many of these people came to be the kind of core maintainers of Railscales movement, as I pretty soon after the first few years stepped aside, realizing that this was not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And with the Railscales side of things, I think the biggest lesson for me was the idea that you can start small. You can start with just one event. And sometimes making that event available online, making that event like the instructions, open sourcing them, can mean that people from very unlikely places across the world will find it. And I'm quite certain that we would have had a much more difficult time in scaling the event within Finland. Say if we wanted to organize the event in Turku or Tampere, which are smaller cities in Finland afterwards, because it was such a novel concept back in 2010. It was something completely different, new, and it was actually much easier to find like-minded people from other big metropolitan cities like Berlin, like Singapore. And then later, it actually started to spread in Helsinki. So there's this like weird dynamic where sometimes it's easier to find your first fans, those who believe in you, those who like are willing to take the risk from unlikely places across the world. Then the other big lesson learned for me for Railscales was the idea that you don't really need a permission to start a community. You need a table, a laptop, and a few willing hearts, people who are ready to pitch in one afternoon. And I think that was one of the core tenets of the success for Railscales. We didn't ask for a huge commitment. We asked for one day. Well, that's quite big now as a person with a family. I realized that that is a big ask. But for a student, it wasn't that huge at the time. And we really paid attention to making the event very invitational and not intimidating at all. After Railscales, while Railscales was growing, I had this sense that I wanted to keep working with coding communities, but I wanted to do it also in a different way. And back then, startups were very big. They were growing rapidly. And I found this very small Y Combinator startup called Codecademy that was promising to revolutionize coding for different communities. And there was a job announcement in 2012 about a community organizer, and I emailed them, and I was an absolute nobody from Helsinki, Finland, but they were also a small company trying to solve a problem that was quite new back then. And I told about my experience organizing these workshops. There was maybe like 6 or 7 of them across the world at that point, and my passion for making coding accessible for all kinds of learners. And on a whim, they hired me to be the 5th employee at a company that would later on grow to be massively, massively big and really be one of the kind of core edtech companies of its era. Codecademy taught me a very different kind of lesson, because with Rails girls, I knew everyone by name, I knew them by their picture. I still had a way of managing all the coaches and almost all the participants. But with Codecademy, already from day one, we spoke about 1 million people, 2 million people. And the company, especially during the first years, it grew really, really rapidly. So I needed a completely different kind of playbook to manage this kind of a community. And it started to dawn on me that for a community this big, we need to start thinking about different roles within a community. It's not that everyone will be able to, say, create different kinds of content, like entire courses on the site, because in the beginning, that's what we thought, that, oh, we're going to have community members create courses for other community members. That it is more nuanced than that, that we need different kinds of roles and responsibilities within a community. And for us at Codecademy, in the early days, it meant that we had the creators who were the ones who really invested the time in the platform. They wrote the content, they did the challenges, courses, posts, etc. But then we started to craft out roles for different kinds of positions, like maintainers, really, really important in tech. There's so many people who want to go and start new things. There's very few people who want to maintain them. And if you find a maintainer, a person whose soul is about ensuring the quality of a community, making sure that there's no bugs, making sure that the updates go through, keep a hold of them, whatever the context you're working in. These people are really, really valuable and important. Then we found a role that is all about engaging people. Because when you join a new community, especially when it's in tech, you want to feel welcome. And we would recognize that within the platform, there was maybe like 20 to 30 people who were at the time really good at just being friendly online, like going and saying, hi, welcome, it's really awesome that you're here. We had this forums product out there at the moment. And they were the ones who were really building the culture, making it friendly, making it a fun and good place to go. And it really starts with individual people and sort of working with them. And then the final piece, separating the people who write the content from people who also want to be there to teach. So what we would see with Codecademy was that while people were going through these interactive, scalable, amazing community created courses, every now and then they would run into problems where they actually needed human help. And this was a time before generative AI, so you couldn't pop into ChatGPT or Claude or something like that and ask it questions. Rather, there were forums, which actually were fed into, well, I don't know if it was the Codecademy forums, but at least Stack Overflow, which is a really popular programmer forum for exactly these kinds of questions. They were put into Claude and these new generative AI tools, so that they kind of use these years and years of humans helping each other online as their training data. So people who are willing to teach and help and be that one-on-one interaction with the community members. And if you're thinking that this only works in like a multi-million person community, that's not the case at all. I think in every professional situation, ever since Codecademy, I've looked for these different types of roles, because it's very easy to, well, not very easy, but like sometimes it's easy to attract people who are really good at starting things, but not really good at maintaining them. Sometimes, especially in tech circles, it's easy to find people who are really willing to teach, but not that interested in building the culture and doing the communications. So a balanced mix of all the different roles is really crucial to making a community healthy. And that's what makes a community feel human. And that can be built into software. So you can design experiences in software that have that sense of soul, even though it would happen at a wildly different scale from the one we are used to working with. And I think scale is an interesting word when it comes to tech. We are very used to using it as a verb. We say that the company scaled from 10 users to 10,000 users, or 10,000 users to 10 million users. But I find it much more interesting to think about scale as a noun, because originally scale was something, you had something small scale and something big scale. And those have different affordances, those have different grain or textures or feelings, how you build something that is inherently small and build something that is inherently big. And I think we need to pay attention to that and not completely sort of just stretch something that is meant to be small into something that is big and assume that everything works without breaking. And most often it doesn't. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to actually move to my next project after Codecademy, which was Hello Ruby. And it's all about shifting the story. Because Codecademy, I knew already back then that it was going to be a massive company. And then I realized that I actually prefer working at a smaller scale. I actually prefer experiences that feel somehow personal and intimate and that I can control. And already a little bit before joining the company, I had started to do these little doodles in the corners of my computer science books. And every time I didn't understand something, I would make this drawing of a little red-haired girl called Ruby. And I would say, oh, like, how would Ruby explain what is object-oriented programming? And then I would think, oh, but she should have these robot friends who are like the Android or like Firefox. And all of a sudden, the entire world of technology turned into stories in my head. And one of the cool things within community that happens is when you find the like-minded people, they will follow you throughout your career. So for me, the reason why I felt that there was something in Hello Ruby that I could build going forward was the fact that I had the Rails Girls community from 5-6 years ago at that point, who kept sort of championing me, who kept saying that, hey, we really want to see this project come to life. We really want to see a storybook about a little girl who explores the ideas around coding. And I saw pictures from Taipei, pictures from Ukraine, pictures from Kharkiv pop up. And I felt that, like maybe I'm not crazy. Maybe this could be like a really smart career move. I even got from Belo Horizonte these tiny Hello Ruby keychains. I'm forever happy for Raquel, who kind of made me realize that, hey, like someone on the opposite side of the world thinks this is such a good idea that she made like a doll before the project exists. And then I put this project on Kickstarter, where it did massively, massively well. And I'm often asked, like, how do you create a book on a platform like this? And I would say I was early. Kickstarter was just blowing up back then in 2013 or 14. And people were still quite excited about crowdfunding. That is not to say that you can't do the same thing nowadays. The playbook just changes roughly every 10 years. And there's new tools and new methods, but I think there's still so much true from past projects that you can learn. It's just a new kind of way of doing things. So for current people who work with projects like these, I wouldn't necessarily say do it on Kickstarter. That's the best way to run a project. I would say take the ideas I presented here, find a community of people who supports you before you think about the launching of the event. Think about like what's the narrative, the personal story that you're willing to bring into all of this. And then choose what is kind of the zeitgeist of the era. Is it TikTok? Is it some other platform where like stuff happens? And honestly, one of the most profound things in my career has been the fact that I did a TED Talk in Geneva in CERN. And it's probably like the 17 minutes or 11 minutes, actually, the most well-spent 11 minutes in my life, because it gave me a platform and time to tell the story from finish to the end, which at the time was kind of in hindsight, it was still the finishing line, or like the beginning line for me. But at the time, it felt like a complete story. And I think the lesson here is not that everyone should go on TED. I think, again, there's new ways of telling stories, but try to find a way you can tell your own story in your own voice, whatever the story of your community like needs, whatever the kind of audience you want. try to find the time to craft that story in the most engaging way possible. Because stories are really important in building a community. Stories throughout the history of humanity have been the way we understand ourselves, the way we understand each other, and the way we understand the world around us. And stories are sticky. They stand with us, and everyone can recite a story. Not everyone can recite a box full of facts. So if you're trying to figure out like ways to first start a community, to scale it, I would say that starting with a story is a really, really good way to go. For me, coming up with a story with Hello Ruby was all about figuring out metaphors and ways of making a story around technology that felt personal, story-driven, and sensory. And that sensory bit is going to take us to the final kind of thing or community effort that I've done in the past. And that is a story about a sensory experience around programming and computers that I just finished last year. It's a public playground in Ruoholahti in Helsinki. You're all very welcome to visit. But its genesis is actually in the Hello Ruby books, because there's all these activities at the end of the book. And the educators in the room, you know the word unplugged computing, the idea that we can learn a lot about computers and computer science with our fingertips. A lot of the abstract ideas of computing, they are quite tangible and real with pen and paper already. And I took this in some ways to the extreme. For a few years, I made like fun videos where we dressed up as CPUs and the RAMs and the ROMs. And I always felt that it would be so cool to do a museum exhibition where you would crawl inside of a computer and you would learn how the bits and logic gates work. And then COVID hit. And all of a sudden, I started to walk around Helsinki and realized that we have these massively underutilized spaces that are the learning environments where kids are behaving exactly in the way I think most progressive educators want them to behave. And those places are called playgrounds. So I would wander in the playgrounds of Helsinki and look at these spaces where kids were self-directed, they were like conflict resolution skills were growing, their communication skills were growing. We grown-ups were there present, but we were not narrating or dictating the way they should be playing or learning about the world. And I went to the then mayor of Helsinki and suggested, in Helsinki we have these beautiful playgrounds, but they are all about pirate ships and princesses, and shouldn't we do something more interesting, like a computer? And thank you for the then mayor. He did help to push this project that had very sort of unlikely participants. So we had the city of Helsinki, we had the Department of Parks and Recreation, but also the Department of Education working with us. We had a landscape architect firm, and then a place sculptor, like a play device maker company from Denmark, Monstrum, working with us. And this by far has been the most massive community project I've ever worked on. It took 4 years, countless meetings, millions of euros probably. And the cool thing about a project like this is I think Railscars has existed for 10 years. I think the Ruby books will probably exist at least for another 10 years, because some of the kids who grew up like reading Ruby books, they are starting to hit puberty, and in a few years they will be like parents, and well, in 10 years they will be parents themselves, and maybe they will want to read the books for their kids. But playgrounds, they last for a long time. I think currently the calculations say that it's roughly 20 years that a playground will stand. So when a lot of my other projects have disappeared, this project will still stand there. And it's a public playground, which was really important for me. The idea that computer science and coding is still, even though we've made it, democratized it by like creating online environments, we've pushed it to schools, which is great. There is still this element that you need to find those online spaces. You need to have an educator or a teacher who's excited about coding to learn it in a public school, even though the core curriculum would say whatever. Whereas the playground is there. It's stubbornly physically there and stands there as a reminder of the big ideas of computer science. And I got to do a lot of really fun playground inspiration work. There's a lot of books I read about public design and sort of like landscape architecture and playground design. And I realized that it is an art form, that playground work people do. And there's so much nuance and interesting work that is being done in those communities. In Helsinki, we have also something very interesting, two sort of social innovations that happen in playgrounds. The first of them is that the major big playgrounds in Helsinki have educated play workers present there. They are there for the after-school kids, like doing guided activities, and they are there for the families with small babies who just want somewhere to meet other parents with their small colicky kids. And it was just such a generous thing to have in a public playground, that there was like a grown-up who was there. So from the get-go, we realized that we somehow need to not use these play workers, but like involve them, because they have so much tacit knowledge about the playground. So we did a lot of workshops where we would ask them about things that were important for them. We did workshops with the stakeholders, the sort of surrounding neighborhoods and the general city publics. And we also spoke with kids about what their sort of dream computer playground might look like. And all of this is something I've never done before when it comes to communities. I've never sort of proactively asked for feedback or involved different stakeholders as a part of project development, because my projects have been much smaller in scale. And I think as you scale a community, as you like find different ways to run your project, it might be beneficial to talk with very diverse stakeholders to just understand how differently people experience things. That was one of the big takeaways for me in the playground project. There were such wildly different use cases for a public park that even still today, I think there's so much to learn. And with kids, we did something interesting. Instead of asking them only to describe their dream playground, because that would probably be like a indoors swimming amusement park with dinosaur theme, which would be impossible to do in the Helsinki winter. We asked them to draw or write the most interesting things they've done on a computer, the most interesting things they've done in a park, the scariest thing they've experienced in a playground, and the scariest things that have happened to them on a computer. And the thing that they are most proud about building in a playground, and the thing that they are most proud about building in a computer. And I think it was really cool to see how the children kind of taught us grown-ups many things through that activity. Because this is a generation of children whose public spaces often look like Fortnite lobbies. So they are more used to meeting one another in a video game than in the neighborhood playground. And we might argue that that's a bad thing or a good thing, but it's a reality for many of them. For many of them also, the things they build in the digital world are as meaningful and as important. Many of the kids would mention Minecraft castles or like elaborate play structures they've created. But it is still true that physical places hold special memories for us. So forts, snowmen, snow castles, all got mentions too. And then the interesting bit about community, I think that also is meaningful for educators. When I was a small kid, we would always be warned about like scary men coming to playgrounds, or there was always this recurring story about a van who kidnaps kids from playgrounds, and we were told not to follow anyone unknown. But a lot of that scary stuff has moved online. So the kids, by default, they would recite stories about scary email or like TikTok or WhatsApp chains that would travel, like videos they saw that felt a little bit uncomfortable. All of this stuff that we as grown-ups don't always take seriously, and I think we should. So sometimes stakeholder dialogue like this ends up giving very, very fruitful and interesting ideas for future projects. So I have here a few pictures from the construction site, but I'm going to skip. I think we're almost out of time for my session part to the finished playground, which looks like this. It's quite cool. There's this like gigantic input-output machine, but there's also activities that are quite cheap to do. There's a flowchart activity that is painted on the floor that anyone in any school district could copy and try out. There's a gigantic carousel. It turns around the big mobile phone. And I think the nice thing here is that I always see like 2 or 3 or 4, 5 or 7 kids there playing together. And then there's little nods to my youth internet culture with Neon Cat and these big stairs or keyboards where you can sit, but also maybe spell out your name. It's quite open-ended, so there's not only one way to play. Kids can come up with their own ways of exploring and trying out the playground. And the one bit that might be interesting for educators in the room is QR codes. So we created these QR codes that we would put on the different play structures, and the kids, but especially the parents, could learn more about binary numbers or algorithms. And there would always be a little prompt that tells the kids something fun they can do with the activity, just giving them a small suggestion on a computational activity they might want to try out. We also created these activity cards that give educators ideas on how to do things, and worksheets and audio guide, and all of this is available online for free in English if you want to take a look and get some inspiration for your own playgrounds or for your own schoolyards on how to take these ideas further. So I'm going to wrap up by kind of summarizing. I feel like the move into public space has been the sort of biggest game changer for me as an educator. I think public spaces are the places where people come together. They create environments where we can do sort of these safe but resource-rich experiences for kids. We can utilize public spaces in such more interesting ways. And it tells also a little bit about the imagination, the journey I've kind of went through with communities, starting from kind of these pop-up events to books, which are more physical, but they still pull a community together, to actual big playground spaces. And if there's anything I want to leave you with, it is this idea that this whole journey has taken me 10 plus years, and I wouldn't have wanted to do it any faster. I think we need to start small. We need to keep learning. We need to keep involving a lot of different people, having a lot of discussions. I think scaling is really human work. It's not just tech work. It's not just something that technically happens. It's what you build into the project you're doing, and you should be really, really aware of how you're doing that work. I think emotions, metaphors, and stories are a huge part of how we make tech accessible for everyone, and we should be really mindful about the kinds of stories we tell. And then I would encourage everyone to think about how can you make your work more public and visible, because that invites more broad participation. So I'm wildly out of time right now. I think we have a few minutes for questions. I'm sorry, Kirsty, I went a little bit over, but thank you so much. And yeah, anything in the chat that pops to your mind? I know you had some really excellent questions over there as well.
So thank you so much. I mean, when you talk, it's inspirational, because you're creating that connection, that fun bridge between, what my daughter might call a boring ICT class where she just sees a room of computers and doesn't want to sit behind one, to really creating those communities and those spaces that are playful and accessible. And it's just very inspiring to hear you talk. Thank you very much for sharing so much with us, and your journey as well with all the things that you've done, and I love the play spaces. So I think we have got a couple of questions in the chat. We have about 5 minutes. I was going to ask, because I know there's a lot of educators listening in today as well. So if you are an ICT educator, what might be the first thing you do that you can simply execute in terms of building these fun, interactive and accessible communities?
I think the first thing is to find those community roles, those people who kind of embody the kinds of roles you think you need in your community. So don't start with like I need to have the perfect product. Start with the people. Start with like finding those first few like-minded folks who you want to start working with. And after that, you can build curriculum, you can build scale it up and so forth. I think people get easily stuck with perfection, and I'm for sure like a person who easily does that. But for instance, with the playground project, it started with a discussion where the mayor pushed me to the right direction. He introduced me to the right people, and that's how things started to go. You don't need to have all the answers in advance. You just take the first step.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. There's somebody in the chat asking, actually, on a personal level, what's next for you, Linda, in terms of, you've done so much already, and
Yeah.
what might the future hold for you?
I think I've just published in Finnish my first grown-up book. It's this kind of book of essays around computer science, and very sort of, instead of technology and sort of commerce or economy or commerce, it's a more humanistic story of computer science. So hopefully I'll get to do something with grown-ups too. And I also want to do more playgrounds. So we have in the works like maybe a synthetic playground, a synthetic biology playground, and a semiconductor playground, and obviously an AI playground. So I have a lot of concepts in my head, and would love to sort of create these bespoke experiences, and where like people could maybe like even travel to new countries to go to these public playgrounds. That would be like a dream thing.
That sounds incredible ambition, and I'm sure something a lot of people would welcome just from the chat itself. There's just so many people excited and inspired by your playground concept, and how that can grow, and it should grow. What might, just on that, what might it look like to bring the computer science curriculum into a park, a hallway, a public
Yeah.
square?
So that is a thing I really want to emphasize, that these like really fancy big playgrounds are important and fun to do, but this can start from any public schoolyard. So for instance, the flowchart activity where we did like a little hopscotch on the ground, you can do it in your local community, like with €2 like markers or chalk. And started out an experiment. And I think often computing is sort of shut into the computing classroom. We sit in front of computers, and we call that computer science and coding learning. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard from a teacher who said, "Oh, we've done 2 hours of Scratch, we are done." And it always makes me want to scream internally, because you're not done. Like, there's so much you can explore in computer science, and I would actually rather have students start having these sort of embodied experiences around computers and computing outside of the computer room, and then only with the computers. And an excellent resource, I don't think it gets as much love as it should, is called Unplugged Computing. Which has a list of, especially for older kids. So I focus a lot on like kindergarteners and early childhood, but Unplugged Computing has a lot of activities for high schoolers and older kids, and they are also translated into multiple different languages. It's a wonderful resource, and built by educators for educators. So excellent stuff.
Amazing. That sounds fantastic. And Linda, we wanted to promote your amazing Career Constellations competition that's on at the moment as well, with a couple of minutes we have left. So we're going to put the link in the chat for everybody, but perhaps you could bring that to life a little bit for listeners.
Absolutely. So in the first webinar, we talked about careers in tech as constellations, instead of ladders, instead of jungle gyms, figuring out that like our personal passions, our interests, they form this like unique constellation on the sky. And we made this little challenge or an activity, a PDF paper, where you get to like run the activity. So there's, I think it's like 17 minutes, the video where I talk about my personal constellation. There's the activity and instructions for an educator to run the activity with your classroom. And we have this challenge or competition going, where the winners will get a mentoring session with me on Zoom or Teams or wherever as a reward. And it ends on 23rd of May, I think. So in a few weeks, you still have time to run this activity with your classroom and share us the results. And yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that link is in the chat for everybody here. So 23rd of May is the deadline for the competition, and amazing prize being with you for mentoring, Linda.
Well, honestly, I think I'm going to learn more from educators.
Well, thank you so much for today. I mean, I think we have several questions in the chat. We probably haven't had time to look at them all, but some fantastic.
What I'll do
feedback.
is I'll check those questions and see if I could answer them on another platform, on like my newsletter or on Instagram, or maybe the Code Week like website, or somewhere, and make sure that you will get the answers you want. So if you still furiously want to type a question in, we'll make sure that we get all the questions answered in some format.
That's great. People said thank you in the chat. And thank you, Linda. Thank you so much for sharing with us their incredible journey and ideas and creativity. I feel very fueled, and I'm going to go speak to my 11-year-old right now
Yes.
and make it playful and fun. So I really appreciate your time. I think everyone on the call wanted to thank you as well. So really appreciate your time. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you so much. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.